I'd like to concentrate this video on this section of the reading, whether natural law contains many precepts or only one. A precept is a principle, an order, a rule, a fundamental order or rule. So the question is whether in natural law there's only one such or whether there are many. It's not such an easy question to answer. It'll take us in different directions here. But what does Thomas say? The precepts of natural law are related to practical reason. Now, practical reason is reasoning about practical matters. What should I do? What would be best to do? As the first principles of demonstration are to speculative reason. So what's speculative reason? It's reasoning about what is. What is the relationship between the side and diagonal of a square? How many countries are there in Europe? How far away is the sun from the earth? Those are speculative or questions about what is, reasoning about what is, as opposed to practical reason, which is reasoning about what should be. Both, he says, are self-evident principles. The first principles of reason are always self-evident first principles. So the first principles of practical reason would be the first principles that guide us in terms of making decisions about what should be done and what shouldn't be done. So if something is self-evident, it's rock bottom in the sense that it is true and we recognize that it's true without proof. The idea of a self-evident first principle, whether it's in morality or mathematics or science, if there are such in science, is that once we understood what's being said, then we also understand that it must be true. That's necessarily true. For instance, in the beginning of Euclid's geometry, he lays down the first principle that the whole is greater than the part, meaning that taking any figure, any geometrical figure, a circle, a square, a triangle, that the whole figure is bigger, greater than, in quantity, any of its parts. The idea is that that's not only true, it's self-evidently true in the sense that once you understand what's being said, you also understand, well, this is true, and crucially, you don't need it to be proved. It's a starting point. So the idea is that it doesn't need to be proved, and if everything needs to be proved, then we are involved in infinite regress. So it solves certain problems, and Thomas thinks that there is a self-evident first principle of morality, and that we find here. Just as being is the first thing which falls within the apprehension as such, that is, the first, when we're sort of looking at the world, the first aspect of the world, anything in the world, is that it is, it has being. It's the most fundamental thing. But when we look at practical reason, reasoning about what to do and what would be good to do, something else is the most fundamental. So just as being is the first thing which falls within the apprehension as such, so good is the first thing to fall within the apprehension of practical reason. So the most fundamental concept in morality is good. For every agent pursues an end which is perceived as good. Okay, that is, people don't always do what in fact is good, but people always do what they at least they think is good. Thus, the first principle for practical reason, that is the fundamental, you might say, principle that we follow always, and we don't need it to be proved to us or even taught to us, is a definition of the good, he says, namely, that the good is that at which all men seek after. That is, we always do that at least which we think is good. Thus, the first precept, the first rule or duty of the law is that, quote, good is to be pursued and performed, evil avoided. So there it is. That's Thomas's idea. That when we're looking at natural law, that is the absolute most basic, most fundamental principle. The good is to be pursued and evil avoided. The idea is that's self-evidently true. It's true to us. We don't doubt that. We couldn't live otherwise. One may say it's the very definition of what's good, that which is to be done. It's the very definition of evil, that which is to be avoided. So the first principle of natural law is do good and avoid evil. As he says, on this principle is founded all others in natural law. So there's more than one principle, but this is the most basic one, and this is the one out of which all the others flow. Now, the first question we may have is, okay, I accept that the good should be done and evil avoided, but what is good? What is the good? And then what is evil? Um, he has an answer to that. How do we determine what is good? He has a rough answer to that. He says, since from this perspective, the good is defined as an end to be pursued, while evil is defined as what is contrary to that end. Reason, our capacity to reason, naturally sees as good, and therefore to be pursued, all those things to which man has a natural inclination, while it sees the contraries of these things as evil, and therefore to be avoided. Pretty amazing. And this is where his theological view comes in. That is, that if we look at ourselves and we see those things to which we are naturally inclined, those are the goods, roughly speaking. How do we know they're good? Well, God put those inclinations in us, right? We are created by God with certain fundamental inclinations. And inclinations are things that we want, things that we are inclined towards. If God put those inclinations in us, then the things that those inclinations incline us towards, they must be goods. Now, there'd be absolutely no reason to think that our inclinations are any guide to what is actually good unless we thought of ourselves as created beings whose inclinations are, in a way, signs of what God wants for us. Right? So it gives us some examples here. He says, thus, the order of precepts in natural law follows the order of natural inclinations. Again, inclinations are fundamental desires, feelings for things that we have. First of all, within man, there is an inclination to good according to the nature he shares in common with all substances. Every substance seeks to preserve its own being according to its nature. Because of this inclination, all things through which man's life is preserved belong to natural law. Like all other living things and even non-living things, according to Thomas, seek to preserve our own being. That's the most fundamental natural inclination that we have. What does that tell us? That our lives are good. So the first good that we can identify is human life. Human life is a good. It should be preserved. Second, within man, there is an inclination to certain more special things according to nature he has in common with other animals. Because of this inclination, those things which nature has taught to all animals are said to be part of natural law. This would include sexual intercourse, education of offspring, and the like. So you and I have sexual inclinations. They lead, and this is complicated, oftentimes to children. So what does that tell us? That the rearing and education of children is good because we're naturally inclined toward. That the family is good. So we've got more goods here, right? We're filling out this, the good is to be pursued by looking at our own most fundamental inclinations. It doesn't stop there, right? He says, third, within man there is an inclination to good according to his own particular nature as rational. For example, he has a natural inclination to know the truth about God and to live in society. So what does that tell you? We have fundamental natural inclinations to knowledge. So knowledge is good. We have a fundamental natural inclination to live amongst other human beings. So the political community is a good. So you can see how this goes. That is, the general principle, the fundamental self-evident principle that the good should be pursued and evil avoided is very, very general. And how do we begin to make it more useful? When we particularize what actually counts as good by looking at our own nature. And by doing so, we come up with, human life is a good. The family is a good. The political community is a good. And knowledge is a good. So things that are destructive to them would be bads. Like ignorance is an evil. Anything that seeks to tear down the community is an evil. Anything that's destructive to human life is an evil.